The metallic clang of the gymnasium doors echoed through the vast, empty space, breaking the eerie silence. Harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Elena blinked awake, disoriented and cold. The first thing she felt was the coarse rope digging into her wrists, tied tightly behind her back. Her legs were similarly bound, her ankles tethered to the base of a pole in the center of the room. Glitter clung to her skin, shimmering mockingly under the harsh lights. Laughter rang out. "Look who finally decided to wake up!" Marcy's voice was shrill with amusement. Her face twisted into a smug grin as she leaned casually against the bleachers. Behind her, Jake and a few others snickered, their phones held up, recording every humiliating moment. "What the hell?" Elena's voice cracked as she tugged against the restraints. Panic surged in her chest, but she bit it down, refusing to show fear. "Untie me." "Ah, don't be such a buzzkill," Jake taunted, dumping another handful of glitter over her head. It caught in her dark hair, sparkling like a cruel halo. "You always act so high and mighty. Consider this a reality check." The group erupted into laughter again, the sound sharp and merciless. Marcy crouched in front of Elena, her smile sickly sweet. "You've been acting like you're better than everyone lately. Ignoring us, walking around like you're some kind of royalty. Well, guess what? You're not." Elena glared up at her, fire blazing in her eyes despite her vulnerable position. "So, this is what you do when someone doesn't play your games? Tie them up and humiliate them? Pathetic." Marcy's grin faltered for a split second before she recovered, standing abruptly. "Keep talking, princess. Maybe we'll post this online. Let everyone see the real you." Elena's heart sank at the mention of social media. She could already imagine the captions. "Little Miss Perfect isn't so perfect now." The thought of becoming a viral laughingstock made her stomach churn, but she refused to let them see her break. "You think this makes you powerful?" she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "It doesn't. It makes you cowards." Jake stepped forward, his face darkening. "Say that again." "Enough." Marcy cut him off, her tone sharper now. "Let's wrap this up. We've made our point." But as they prepared to leave, the gym doors swung open with a bang. "Elena?" A deep, commanding voice rang out, freezing everyone in their tracks. The group turned in unison, their smug expressions replaced with wide-eyed fear. Standing in the doorway was a man in a tailored suit, his presence exuding authority and power. Behind him, two security guards flanked his sides, their stern faces promising swift consequences. "Dad?" Elena's voice was small, a mix of relief and disbelief. The man, Alexander Grayson, strode forward, his sharp gaze sweeping over the scene. He took in the ropes, the glitter, the mocking faces of the so-called friends, and his jaw tightened with barely contained fury. "Untie her. Now!" His voice was cold and deadly, each word slicing through the air like a blade. Marcy stammered, backing away. "We were just... Now?" Jake scrambled to comply, fumbling with the knots as the others stood frozen in shock. As soon as Elena was free, Alexander stepped forward, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softening just for her. She nodded, though tears pricked at her eyes. Alexander straightened, turning back to the group. The softness vanished, replaced by an icy rage that sent shivers down their spines. "You have no idea who you just messed with," he said, his voice low but filled with menace. The gym seemed to shrink under the weight of his words. "Security will escort you out," he continued, motioning to the guards. "And believe me when I say you will regret this. I'll make sure of it." The group was herded out, their protests and excuses falling on deaf ears. Marcy looked back once, her face pale and terrified, before disappearing through the doors. Elena sat there for a moment, her hands trembling as the adrenaline began to fade. Alexander knelt beside her, his expression softening again. "Let's get you home." She nodded silently, leaning on him as they left the gym. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over, and neither did they. The news of what happened in the gymnasium spread like wildfire. By the next morning, The entire school was buzzing. Some were horrified, others curious, and a few, those who'd never liked Elena, were disappointed they hadn't been there to witness it themselves. Marcy and her friends didn't show up to school. Rumors swirled about expulsions, lawsuits, and the wrath of Alexander Grayson, the man who wasn't just Elena's father but one of the most powerful business tycoons in the city. Elena, however, didn't bask in the chaos. She kept her head down, determined to move forward, but the stares and whispers followed her everywhere. Did you hear? Her dad owns like half the companies in the state. No wonder Marcy's crew is screwed. I mean, what were they thinking? You don't mess with someone like her. Elena ignored them all, focusing on getting through her classes. But by lunch, she couldn't take it anymore. Retreating to the library, she sank into a corner chair, hoping for some peace. Hey! She looked up to see Caleb, a quiet boy from her English class. He wasn't someone she'd ever spoken to much, but his easygoing nature made him popular in his own way. What do you want? She asked, her tone sharper than intended. He held up his hands. Relax. I'm not here to gawk. Just thought you could use some company. Elena hesitated but eventually nodded. Caleb sat across from her, placing his tray on the table. So, he began, you're basically a superhero now. She frowned. What? Rich dad swooping in, saving the day. This kind of epic. Elena couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. It didn't feel epic. Caleb smiled, but his expression grew serious. What they did was messed up. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around. Thanks, she said quietly, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Meanwhile, Marcy's world was crumbling. Her parents had been furious when the school called, detailing the incident and the potential legal consequences. Alexander Grayson had pulled no punches, threatening to press charges unless she and her friends faced strict disciplinary action. Jake had already cracked, spilling everything to his parents in a desperate attempt to shift the blame. Marcy, however, was left to grapple with the fallout. She sat in her room, staring at her phone. Messages flooded in, some from people condemning her, others from fake friends trying to distance themselves. How did it come to this? She wondered, tears streaming down her face. For years, she'd been the queen bee, the one everyone wanted to be or be friends with. But now all of that felt hollow. And then there was Elena, the girl she tormented out of jealousy and insecurity, who had faced her humiliation with more grace and strength than Marcy could ever muster. Marcy hated herself for what she'd done, but she didn't know how to make it right. The days passed, and things began to shift. Elena, tired of the constant whispers and stares, decided to take control of the narrative. During a school assembly, she stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. I know everyone here has heard what happened, she began, her voice steady, and I'm not here to relive it. But I want to say this, what Marcy and her friends did wasn't just about me. It was about a culture that lets people think it's okay to tear others down to feel powerful. The room was silent, every eye on her. I'm not perfect, she continued, but no one deserves to be humiliated like that. And if you've ever felt like you had to stay silent while someone else was being bullied, I'm telling you now, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to say no. Her words hung in the air, powerful and unyielding. Marcy, sitting in the back of the auditorium, felt a lump in her throat. For the first time in a long time, she saw Elena not as a rival, but as someone she wanted to be. The story of the gymnasium became a turning point for everyone involved. Elena found her voice, using her experience to advocate for change, while Marcy began a painful but necessary journey of self-reflection and redemption. By the end of the school year, the scars remained, but so did the lessons. For Elena, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving, turning her pain into power. And for Marcy, it was about proving that even the worst mistakes could lead to something better. Because in the end, it wasn't just about what happened, it was about what came next. As the summer break approached, Elena found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The chaos, the humiliation, the sudden attention. It all felt surreal. But through it all, something inside her had shifted. She was no longer the quiet girl who let the world pass her by. No longer the girl who hid in the shadows, afraid of the spotlight. When she looked into the mirror now, she saw someone different, stronger, more confident. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The months of media attention had made her something of a local figure. Invitations to speak at youth groups, anti-bullying campaigns, and even charity events flooded in. At first, Elena had been hesitant. The idea of standing in front of large crowds terrified her. But her father, Alexander, was always there, offering quiet encouragement and reminding her that the world needed to hear her story. One evening, as they sat together in the large living room of their home, Elena spoke her mind. "Dad, I never asked for any of this. The spotlight, the attention. I just wanted to survive, to finish high school and go on with my life. But now, I feel like I have to do something bigger with all this. It feels like a chance to change things, but I don't know how." Alexander leaned forward, his eyes full of pride. "You already are changing things, Elena, by being yourself, by standing up when everyone else was sitting down. You've given hope to others who might have felt helpless. But this is your story now. You write the next chapter." His words lingered with her as she continued her work with the anti-bullying campaign, finding herself more and more involved in organizing workshops and speaking out. Each event gave her a sense of purpose, of empowerment. Every speech she gave was an act of defiance against the girl who once felt invisible, helpless, and weak. But with every step forward, there was always a shadow from the past, lurking just beneath the surface. Across town, Marcy sat in the dim light of her bedroom, a photo album open in front of her. She ran her fingers over the images of her and her friends, smiling in happier times, before the fallout. Her parents had gone quiet after the incident, their faces etched with disappointment. They hadn't scolded her as harshly as some might expect, but their silence had cut deeper than any harsh words could. Her life, once filled with social events and constant attention, had come to a standstill. She couldn't even bear to look at her friends anymore, the ones who had once been her closest allies. Jake had tried to reach out, apologizing profusely, but Marcy had shut him down. Her shame was too great. She couldn't face the people who had participated in tearing down someone like Elena. And then there was the deep, gnawing regret. She knew she had been cruel, but it wasn't until the whole school had turned its eyes on her, until the weight of her actions had been made so public, that she realized the full extent of the damage she'd caused. She had hurt Elena, but more than that, she had hurt herself. Marcy's identity had always been wrapped up in her social standing, her ability to manipulate others into giving her power. But now that power was gone. Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. "Marcy, there's someone here to see you." Marcy's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. She stood hesitantly as the door creaked open, and there, standing in the doorway, was Elena. Marcy blinked, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. What are you doing here?" Elena took a step inside, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to talk. I know you probably didn't expect that." Marcy stood frozen for a moment, then motioned for Elena to sit. "I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me." Elena sat down slowly, her eyes never leaving Marcy's. "I don't know if I forgive you yet, but I've been thinking, and I realized that what happened, what you did, it wasn't just about me. It was about something bigger, something that needed to be addressed. Maybe it's time we both faced it." Marcy swallowed hard. "I can't even begin to apologize enough. I can't change what I did, and I don't even deserve forgiveness. I've been so selfish." Elena leaned forward slightly, her gaze softening. "You hurt me, Marcy, but you also hurt yourself. I think you know that. You lost something that was part of your identity, something that made you feel powerful. But you can rebuild yourself just like I did. I don't expect us to be friends, but I think it's important you understand that there's always a chance for change." Marcy's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know if I can ever make it right, but I'll try. I'll start with myself." Elena nodded, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "That's all anyone can do." As Elena stood to leave, Marcy called after her. "Wait." Elena paused, looking back. "You're stronger than I ever was. I hope you know that. Elena smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that radiated from the inside. I think I do. By the end of the summer, the dynamics had shifted. Elena continued to speak out, her presence at school events a beacon for students who had felt voiceless. Her speeches, now filled with more personal reflection and calls for unity, resonated with everyone who had felt the sting of cruelty. Marcy, on the other hand, took a quieter approach to her redemption. She didn't seek out the spotlight. Instead, she focused on self-reflection, confronting her past actions and slowly rebuilding the trust of those she had hurt. Her relationship with Elena remained distant, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They were no longer enemies. But for Elena, this wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It wasn't about getting revenge or seeing those who wronged her punished. It was about healing, growth, and using her voice to create change. She had been knocked down, humiliated, and broken. But now she was something else. Stronger, wiser, ready to face whatever the future held with the same resilience that had carried her through the worst moments of her life. In the end, the greatest lesson was clear. Sometimes the deepest pain leads to the greatest transformation. And for both Elena and Marcy, it was a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives.
The crash of the stainless steel tray against the counter nearly drowned out the impatient voice of the customer. "Miss, I've been waiting for 20 minutes. Are you even listening?" Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I swallowed hard, forced a tired smile, and slid the plate across. My arms ached from carrying stacks of dishes all day. My back felt like it was on fire, and the sweat sticking to my uniform clung like glue. Double shifts at the diner weren't glamorous, but they paid the bills. At least they were supposed to. By the time I finally clocked out, the sky was dark. My shoes squished with sweat as I dragged myself down the block, just dreaming of unlocking the front door to my little house, showering off the grease smell, and collapsing into bed. But when I reached the street corner, I froze. The porch light was off, the curtains were missing, and a moving truck sat in the driveway, tailgate open, men tossing furniture inside like it was scrap wood. "What the hell?" My voice cracked as I dropped my bag and ran forward. One of the movers barely looked at me. "You the tenant?" "Orders from the owners. House sold this morning. Everything's being cleared." My heart slammed so hard I couldn't breathe. "Number, that's not possible. This is my house. My name is on the—" Before I could finish, I heard laughter. Light, sharp, cutting through the night. I turned, and there she was, my sister Amanda, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, smirk plastered on her perfect face. "Well," she drawled, tilting her head like she was enjoying a private joke. "I guess someone finally told you." I staggered toward her, every muscle in my body trembling. "What did you do? Why is my house being emptied?" Amanda didn't even blink. She leaned closer, her perfume hitting me like poison. "Mom and Dad sold it. Signed everything over to fund Kyle's trip to Europe. You know, something worthwhile. He deserved it more than you." Her words burned like acid. My brother, the golden boy, the one who never worked a day in his life, who flunked out of college twice, and still got praised for finding himself. And me, I'd been killing myself with double shifts, holding everything together. I felt my lips curve into a slow, sharp smile that didn't match the chaos in my chest. Amanda's brows lifted, confused. She thought she'd crushed me. She thought I'd beg, cry, maybe throw a scene. Instead, I just whispered, "Wait until you hear who really owned that land." The color drained from her face, because she didn't know. None of them knew. And that was the beginning of their undoing. Amanda's smirk only deepened when she saw the shock on my face. She folded her arms like she had won some prize. "Don't look so surprised, Riley," she said. "Kyle's future matters more than your little house. He deserved it more than you." Her words stabbed at me, but instead of breaking down, I forced myself to stay calm. My voice came out steady, sharper than I expected. "Deserved it? He's never worked a day in his life. I've been pulling double shifts just to keep this place running, and you think selling it behind my back is fair?" Amanda laughed. Fair. Life isn't fair. Mom and Dad finally did something right for once. The movers kept shuffling boxes, avoiding eye contact like they didn't want to get dragged into the family drama. I stepped closer, lowering my voice, but making sure she heard every syllable. "You think this house belonged to Mom and Dad to sell?" I asked. Amanda tilted her head, smirk still on her face. "Obviously. Who else would it belong to?" That's when I let the smallest smile tug at my lips. I leaned in, close enough for her to feel the sting of my words. "Wait until you hear who really owned that land." Her smirk faltered for the first time. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my phone out, swiping quickly to the scanned documents Grandma had given me months before. The official stamp glared back in the glow of the screen. "You should have paid attention before running your mouth, Amanda. Grandma didn't leave this land to Mom, Dad, or Kyle. She left it to me, legally recorded, witnessed, and sealed." Amanda's eyes darted to the movers, then back to me. Her confidence cracked just enough for me to see the fear she tried to hide. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I said softly. "Tomorrow you'll see the proof. And when you do, that smirk of yours won't save you." For the first time all night, Amanda had nothing to say. The silence between us was heavier than any insult she'd thrown before. And standing there, tired, angry, and still in my grease-stained uniform, I realized something. I finally had the upper hand. The next morning, I barely slept. My uniform from the diner still hung on the back of the chair, carrying that faint smell of grease and burnt coffee I couldn't scrub off my skin. But I didn't care. My mind wasn't on double shifts or aching feet anymore. It was on the fireproof envelope sitting on the dresser, the one Grandma had insisted I keep safe. By 9:30 a.m., I was already downtown, the courthouse looming over the city like some concrete fortress. People rushed in and out, lawyers in sharp suits, clerks balancing files, a few nervous couples clutching paperwork. I stood there gripping the strap of my worn-out bag, my pulse drumming. At 9:59, they arrived. Amanda first, clicking down the sidewalk in heels too bright for the occasion, still pretending this was some kind of performance. Behind her came Mom and Dad, both dressed like they'd just walked out of a country club brunch. And, of course, Kyle trailed last, sleepy-eyed, yawning, sunglasses pushed up like the sunlight was personally attacking him. The moment he saw me, Kyle snorted. "Really, Riley? You dragged us all the way down here because you're jealous of a vacation?" I clenched my jaw. "Number, I dragged you here because you sold something you didn't own." Dad's lips pressed into a thin line. "Stop this nonsense. We handled it, Riley. The house was ours to sell. End of story." "Not quite," I said, pulling the envelope from my bag. My hands didn't even shake this time. I'd been waiting for this. "You sold the structure, sure, but the land, the deed to the actual soil, belongs to me. Grandma made sure of it." I laid the documents flat on the table inside the recorder's office. The clerk glanced at the raised seal, then at my parents. "This was recorded last December," she said matter-of-factly. "Valid and active. Leasehold interest, consent clause." Yes, she's correct. Any sale without the landowner's signature is unenforceable. Amanda's face drained of color. Mom stiffened, clutching her purse like someone had just told her it was fake. Dad's nostrils flared, but he didn't argue. The seal spoke louder than any excuse. Kyle blinked, confused. "Wait, so what does that mean? The money?" The clerk adjusted her glasses and read aloud. "Any transfer made in violation of the consent clause shall result in the full net proceeds reverting to the landowner." She looked at me. "That's you." The silence that followed was so heavy I could feel the weight of it pressing down on the room. Amanda whispered, "You're lying?" But her voice cracked halfway. "No," I said, steady as stone. "You sold the roof over my head, but Grandma made sure I'd always have the ground beneath my feet. That money you thought would send Kyle across Europe? It's mine now." Kyle's sunglasses slipped down his nose. "You've got to be kidding me." I turned to face all of them, my voice sharper now, carrying every sleepless night, every double shift, every insult they'd thrown at me. "You treated me like I was disposable, like my work didn't matter, like my life was less valuable than Kyle's endless vacations. But here's the truth. Grandma saw me. She trusted me. And now you'll see just how big of a mistake you made." For the first time in years, they weren't laughing, mocking, or sneering. They were silent, because the one thing they valued most, money, had slipped straight through their fingers into mine. And standing there, I realized something I never thought I'd feel around them: power. The courthouse air still clung to my skin as I walked outside with the envelope pressed tight against my chest. The sun had burned through the morning haze, but my parents and siblings stood in the shadow of the building, their faces twisted with disbelief. Amanda was the first to break the silence. She stormed toward me, heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots. "You set this up, didn't you?" she hissed. "You and Grandma, plotting behind our backs. You knew about this all along." I met her glare without flinching. Of course I knew. That's why I didn't fall apart when I saw movers clearing my house last night. You thought I'd just roll over, but Grandma didn't raise me to be stupid. She raised me to survive you. Amanda's jaw tightened, but before she could spit out another insult, Mom's voice cracked through the tension. "How dare you embarrass us like that, Riley?" Her nails dug into the leather of her purse. "You stood there in front of a clerk and humiliated this family." I actually laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that cut through her theatrics. "No, Mom. You humiliated yourselves when you forged ahead with a sale you didn't have the right to make. I didn't ruin your reputation. You did that the second you signed papers without understanding what you were signing." Dad finally stepped forward, face red, voice sharp. "You think you're clever, waving paperwork around like some kind of lawyer? Let me remind you, Riley, you wouldn't even have had that house if it weren't for us. We co-signed. We carried the risk." I squared my shoulders, meeting his glare head on. "And Grandma made sure you couldn't touch it when it mattered most. She knew what you'd try to do. She knew you'd always put Kyle first. That's why she locked you out legally and gave me the ground beneath the house. She didn't trust you, and now you've proved her right." Kyle scoffed, tugging his sunglasses off and shoving them into his pocket. "So what, Riley? You've got the money now? Congratulations. You're still a waitress pulling double shifts. Do you really think owning some dirt makes you better than me?" I turned toward him, and this time, my voice wasn't just steady. It carried a weight even I hadn't felt before. "No, Kyle. What makes me better is that I work for what I have. I don't need Mom and Dad to rob other people to pay for my vacations. I don't need handouts. I've been surviving without your approval my whole life, and now I'll thrive without it." For a moment, his smug expression faltered. A few people on the courthouse steps had stopped to watch, their curious glances flicking between us. It wasn't a private argument anymore. It was a public unraveling. My family, so obsessed with appearances, was being stripped bare right in front of strangers. Amanda tugged on Mom's sleeve, whispering urgently. Mom nodded, then tried to soften her tone like she always did when she wanted to manipulate me. "Listen, Riley, you've made your point. But think about what you're doing. This money, it was supposed to give Kyle opportunities. Don't you want your brother to have a future? Isn't family more important than money?" My throat tightened, but not from doubt, from fury. "Family?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Family is what you use as a shield every time you betray me. Family didn't think twice about selling the roof over my head. Family laughed when I worked double shifts while Kyle slept in. Family told me I wasn't worth as much as a plane ticket to Europe. Don't stand there and lecture me about family when you've never treated me like part of one." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see people whispering at the edge of the steps, their eyes wide. My parents hated gossip more than anything, and now they were the center of it. Amanda broke first, her voice sharp but shaky. "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but when the money runs out, you'll come crawling back. You always do." I stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her chin up to meet my eyes. "No, Amanda, the crawling stops today." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I turned and started walking down the courthouse steps, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand. Behind me, their voices rose, angry, panicked, desperate. But I didn't stop. Every step felt like a chain snapping off my back, years of humiliation and betrayal falling away. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. A message from the escrow officer, funds released. Proceeds redirected to Heart Corner Land, LLC. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the words, my hands trembling. It was real. The money they thought was Kyle's was mine. All of it. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of sheer relief. They had taken everything they thought I had. But Grandma had given me something they could never steal. And now, I was finally free. The message from escrow lit up my screen like a beacon. Funds released. Proceeds redirected to Heart Cornerland, LLC. My hands tightened around the phone until I thought it might crack, but I couldn't let go. This was real. It wasn't a bluff, wasn't just some paperwork I waved in my family's face. It was mine. The very money they stole to fund Kyle's Playboy vacation was now sitting safely under my name. Behind me, I heard the shuffle of heels and the hurried breath of Amanda catching up. She grabbed my arm, nails digging into my sleeve. "You can't just take it all," she hissed, her face blotchy with panic. "That's not how family works." I yanked my arm free. "Don't you dare use the word family with me again." Mom and Dad were right behind her, their polished appearances unraveling by the second. Dad's face was red, his jaw tight, while Mom's lipstick smudged as she muttered desperate appeals. "Riley, think about this. Be reasonable. We can sit down, discuss a fair split." I spun on my heel, my voice slicing through her words. "Fair split? Where was the fair split when you signed my house away without even calling me? Where was the fair split when Amanda mocked me last night for working 2 jobs while Kyle partied? Number, you wanted all of it. Now you get nothing." Kyle, finally realizing the weight of it all, shoved his sunglasses back on, but his voice cracked when he spoke. "You don't need that money, Riley. You're just gonna waste it. You don't even know how to handle it." I stared at him for a long moment, then said softly, "Funny. That's exactly what Grandma used to say about you." His mouth fell open, but no words came. The tension around us had drawn a small crowd. Lawyers exiting the courthouse, strangers with coffee cups. They all lingered, curious. My family, who always valued appearances above all else, was now being exposed in broad daylight. Their humiliation wasn't just in losing the money, it was in losing the performance they'd worked so hard to maintain. I stepped forward, lowering my voice so only they could hear. "Do you know what this really is? Justice. For every time you called me less. For every night I came home from work and found you throwing parties with the lights I paid for. For every sigh, every sneer, every reminder that Kyle was the golden child and I was the burden. Justice doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes on embossed paper with a seal. And sometimes," I lifted the envelope slightly, "it comes with a bank transfer." Amanda's eyes filled with something I'd never seen in her before. Not just anger, but fear. Mom pressed her lips together, and Dad, for the first time, looked like he might break. I turned away before they could see the tears burning the edges of my own vision. They would never understand that I hadn't wanted revenge. What I wanted was respect. What I wanted was to matter. And thanks to Grandma, I finally had something they couldn't take away. As I walked down the block, my phone buzzed again. A message from the bank app confirmed the transfer. 6 figures, clean, secured. My legs almost gave out beneath me, but I kept walking, step by step until the courthouse was behind me. I stopped at the diner on the corner, the same one where I'd spent countless nights pouring coffee for strangers who barely looked at me. For once, I didn't walk in as the tired waitress. I walked in as someone who had taken back her life. Sliding into a booth, I set the envelope beside me and finally let myself exhale. For years, I thought survival meant enduring whatever scraps my family threw at me. But now I knew survival was more than that. It was standing up. It was refusing to be their punching bag. It was holding the ground beneath my feet and saying, "No more." And as I sipped a cup of coffee that I didn't have to serve, I smiled. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was winning.
I knew the laughter was for me the second I stepped onto the gravel driveway. It came sharp, high, and pointed, like they'd been rehearsing it since dawn. My cousin Marissa elbowed her sister and whispered loud enough for half the crowd to hear. "Well, would you look at that? Didn't know auctions let in people who live paycheck to paycheck." I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't give them what they wanted. I just kept walking, heels steady, chin up. I'd learned years ago that silence cuts deeper than snapping back. What they didn't know, what nobody here knew, was that I hadn't been broke in a very, very long time. The estate in front of us stretched wider than 3 football fields, with a white facade and pillars like something out of a magazine. People were buzzing about rumors: $12 million, private gardens, a pool house bigger than normal homes. This place was the crown jewel of the auction circuit, and every wealthy family in the county wanted a piece of it, including mine. And they were thrilled to see me right in the middle of the crowd, like some embarrassment they hoped would disappear if they stared hard enough. Aunt Jenna gave me a slow once-over. "Sweetheart," she cooed, "this isn't a thrift sale. You don't get discounts for being you." I smiled politely. "I know exactly where I am." She smirked like she'd won something. Truth was, I had avoided gatherings with them for years. After Mom passed, things changed. My relatives had treated me like I was a burden, like every breath I took cost them something. When I left home at 19 with 2 suitcases and a dream to build my own real estate research firm, they predicted I'd end up begging for help or crawling back with apologies. I had done neither. Instead, I worked like I had no choice but to win. And it turned out, I was very good at it. By 27, I had clients on both coasts. By 28, wealthy investors trusted my market forecasts over some companies' entire analytics teams. And a year after that, I made a private deal with a retiring developer that changed my financial life forever. But right now, the only thing they saw was the girl they used to insult at holidays. I walked toward the registration booth. The woman behind the table looked up and smiled warmly. "Name, please?" "Alexis Reed." Her eyebrows lifted. Recognition flickered. She'd clearly seen my credentials, or the bank letter I submitted to qualify. "Welcome, Ms. Reed," she said, handing me a sleek black paddle. "You're cleared for the full bidding range." Marissa, who'd followed me just close enough to eavesdrop, choked on her breath. "Full? You mean?" The registration woman gave her a polite, practiced smile. "Only registered bidders beyond this point, ma'am." Marissa stared at my paddle like it betrayed her personally. I could practically hear her brain scrambling. Alexis? Registered? Fully? It didn't fit the story they'd created about me. Inside the courtyard, I found a quiet corner. People gathered in clusters, discussing budgets and plans to flip or rent the estate. I watched the auctioneer step onto the platform, adjusting his microphone. My heart thudded with adrenaline, not from nerves, but from the anticipation of what was about to unfold. The estate had sentimental weight for my relatives. For 3 generations, they'd dreamed about owning a property like this. They'd been bragging about it for months, telling everyone the Reed clan was finally rising again, as if they hadn't stepped on me every chance they got. But the universe has a funny sense of humor. Because the one person in the family they'd always dismissed as useless, she had the highest spending power in this courtyard. And they had absolutely no idea. The auctioneer lifted his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin in 60 seconds. Marissa's voice carried across the space. "She'll faint before she bids. Watch this." I inhaled slowly.
Calm. Steady.
Focused. My phone vibrated with a message. "Evan, my financial advisor. Funds are cleared. You're good to go, Lex." A small rush of warmth went through my chest. Not from the money, but from knowing I wasn't alone in my fight anymore. I had built a circle of people who respected my work, valued my ideas, and believed in me. The auctioneer slammed the gavel once. "We will begin the bidding for Willowcrest Estate at $6 million. Several paddles lifted immediately, maybe 20. 6.5.
7.
7.5.
8.
My relatives joined too, smug and confident, whispering things like, "We've got this. She'll stay quiet." They weren't wrong. For the first 20 minutes, I stayed silent. 8.2. 8.3. 9 million. People started dropping out. Aunt Jenna's voice rose. 9.5. The crowd murmured. My cousins clapped like seals celebrating. "This is it. We're getting it." I leaned against a marble pillar, checking my watch. Evan had told me exactly the point where everyone else's budgets would tap out. 10 million. 10.2. 10.4. Only 4 bidders remained, including my family. I slipped my paddle between my fingers. The auctioneer wiped his brow. 10,500,000. Do we have 10.6? Aunt Jenna hesitated. This was their limit. I knew it. She whispered to her husband, panic tinging her voice. "We can't go higher." Not without liquidating something. The auctioneer raised his chin. 10-5 going once. My cousins looked proud. They thought they were winning. Going twice. I raised my paddle gently. 11 million. Gasps rippled like wind through wheat. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. We have $11 million from bidder 69. Every head turned toward me. My relatives froze like statues. Marissa sputtered. She what? She can't. But I wasn't finished. The auctioneer looked around. Do we have 11.1? Silence. Not a single paddle moved. Aunt Jenna tried to save face. We don't compete with theatrics. The auctioneer lifted his gavel high. 11 million, going once. My pulse thrummed. Going twice. A final gasp escaped the crowd.
Sold.
To Ms. Alexis Reed. The gavel hit the podium with a crack that echoed right through my relative's pride. I lowered my paddle, finally letting myself smile. The girl they mocked? She just bought the estate they came to claim. The courtyard felt strangely quiet after the gavel fell. People whispered, eyes darting toward me like I had broken some unwritten rule. But the only looks I cared about were the ones coming from my relatives, the shock, the confusion, the disbelief. It was almost enough to make me laugh. Aunt Jenna marched toward me first, heels clicking like she was storming a courtroom. Alexis, she hissed, tell me you didn't actually bid. You don't have that kind of money. I met her glare calmly. Why does that bother you so much? She blinked, thrown off. It doesn't bother me. We just don't want you making a fool of yourself. I tilted my head. Funny. You didn't care about that when you all laughed at me walking in. Her face reddened instantly. Before she could respond, my cousin Trevor joined in, puffing his chest. Look, if you wanted attention, you didn't need to bid on an estate. Just say something next time. I let out a soft breath. I didn't do it for attention. They stared at me, waiting for an explanation. I didn't owe them. Their expectations of me were still trapped in the past, back when I worked late nights at diners to afford community college textbooks. They didn't know how much I'd grown, how many people now depended on me professionally, how much I had changed since leaving their negativity behind. Marissa crossed her arms. Well, are you going to explain how you magically afford a $12 million estate? Or is this another one of your fantasies? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I don't owe you a breakdown of my finances. But I will say this. While you all spent the last few years gossiping about me, I spent mine building something real. They exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't magic, I continued. It was work. Something you never saw, because you were too busy assuming I'd fail. Their expressions sank, one by one. Before they could recover, the auction staff approached me with a tablet. Ms. Reed, congratulations. We'll finalize paperwork in the main office. Thank you, I said, following him past my frozen relatives. Their silence felt like closure. Inside the office, everything moved quickly, signatures, confirmation emails, proof of funds. The estate manager, a polite man named Daniel, looked genuinely impressed. You've secured a beautiful property, he said. Any plans yet? Yes, I replied. This will be the headquarters for my new development firm. I want it to be a place where women in real estate can actually grow instead of getting pushed aside. His eyes widened. That's incredible. We don't hear that often. Someone's got to change the narrative, I said. He laughed softly. Well, you certainly made an entrance today. When I exited the office, my relatives were still standing in the courtyard. They looked smaller now, like their confidence had drained out of them. For a second, I felt a pang of something, maybe old hurt, maybe old memories, but it passed. Aunt Jenna approached again, but slower this time. Alexis, you really bought it? She asked, voice thin. Yes, I said simply. She swallowed hard. We didn't know you were doing so well. That was kind of the point, I said. You never ask. Marissa fidgeted, her earlier smugness gone. So, what happens now? I adjusted my bag, giving them a faint smile. Calm, controlled, genuine. What happens now? I go home. I keep working. I keep growing. And maybe one day you'll realize success doesn't look the way you expected." Their faces dropped again, but this time they didn't argue. I turned toward the exit, warm sunlight stretching across the driveway. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. 2 weeks after the auction, Willow Crest didn't feel like a stranger's estate anymore. The gates opened automatically when my car approached, the long driveway glowing under the evening lights I'd just had installed. It felt surreal, peaceful, earned, mine. I walked across the marble foyer, listening to the echo of my footsteps. The renovation team had already cleared the old furniture, and the space felt like a blank canvas ready for my next chapter. My next headquarters. My next beginning. I stood near the tall windows, overlooking the gardens, when my phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Media picked up your auction win. Congratulations again, Lex." I smiled. I didn't care about press coverage, but it was satisfying to know the story was out there. Not for revenge, not for attention, but because it showed how far I'd come since everyone counted me out. I turned when I heard footsteps. The estate manager, Daniel, walked in with a stack of plans. "Ready to go over the layout?" "Absolutely," I said. We spent the next hour reviewing every detail: workspace designs, conference rooms, the mentorship wing for young women entering real estate. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a genuine sense of purpose. Not proving anyone wrong, building something right. When we wrapped up, Daniel gathered his papers. "Your team's going to love this place. And I have to say, what you did at that auction, that took courage." "It took history," I corrected softly. "Years of it." He nodded with understanding. "Well, you changed yours today." After he left, I stepped outside onto the balcony as warm wind brushed against my shoulders. The sunset washed the entire estate in gold, and for a moment, I just stood there breathing it all in. Then I heard tires crunching on the gravel below. I looked down. My relatives, Aunt Jenna, Marissa, Trevor, they were all standing outside their car, shifting awkwardly, unsure whether they should walk closer or leave. I sighed, grounding myself. This wasn't something I feared anymore. I made my way downstairs and opened the front door. "You guys need something?" Aunt Jenna clasped her hands. "We, wanted to apologize." Trevor nodded quickly.
Yeah.
"We didn't realize you were doing so well." Marissa swallowed hard. "We shouldn't have mocked you. It wasn't right." Their voices were quiet, almost embarrassed. It was the first time in my life any of them had apologized for anything. I leaned against the doorway, not angry, just tired of the old story. It wasn't about money.
It was about respect.
And how you treated me. Aunt Jenna looked down. "We know. And we're sorry." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you. I appreciate it." Their heads lifted slightly, hopeful. But I continued gently. "I'm not living in the past anymore. I worked for this life. I built it without you. I'm not angry. I'm just done trying to earn approval I never needed." They looked stunned, but they nodded. And that moment, calm, clear, peaceful, felt like the real victory. Not the estate. Not the money. Freedom. After my relatives drove away, the estate settled back into its quiet evening rhythm. Lights shimmered along the walking paths, and the fountains in the courtyard hummed softly. For the first time, the place didn't feel intimidating. It felt like home. I wandered through the empty halls, running my hand along the newly polished banisters. This wasn't just an estate. It was proof of every sleepless night, every risk I'd taken, every moment I refused to give up when people expected me to break. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Evan. "Everything okay? You sounded tense earlier." I typed back. "All good." They came to apologize. "I think this chapter is closed." A moment later, he replied. "Proud of you. You handled it with more grace than most people would." I smiled. Grace wasn't something I had growing up, it was something I had to learn in order to survive. I stepped outside onto the stone patio. The air smelled fresh, and cicadas buzzed faintly in the distance. I sat at the edge of the garden, staring at the silhouette of the estate against the fading light. This place was the beginning of my new company, but it was also the beginning of something more personal. The life I'd built without needing validation or approval from people who once dismissed me. The garden gates creaked open, and I turned to see Daniel walking up with a clipboard tucked under his arm. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said. "Just wanted to drop off the final blueprint revisions." I waved him over. "You're not intruding. I could use a distraction." He sat beside me on the stone bench. "Long day." "A symbolic one," I said with a small laugh. My relative showed up. Tried to apologize. He raised an eyebrow. "And how'd that go?" "I accepted it," I replied. "But I didn't let them back into a place in my life they never earned." He nodded slowly. "Healthy choice." I glanced at him. "Feels like this estate isn't just a business move for me. It's healing something." He smiled. "Then it's already worth the investment." For a moment, we sat quietly, two people on a stone bench, looking out at a future rising from the ashes of old wounds. "Alexis," he said gently, "I've seen a lot of people buy properties, but I've never seen anyone reclaim their story quite like you did." I felt warmth rise in my chest. "Thank you. That means more than you know." He stood, offering a hand to help me up. "Ready to see the new office wing tomorrow?" "Absolutely." As we walked back toward the entrance, the estate lights flickered on one by one, glowing like a promise. I paused at the door, taking it all in. The girl who once felt small, ignored, and underestimated was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built her own path, her own company, and now, her own estate. My revenge wasn't the purchase. It was the quiet confidence of a life I shaped myself. A life that finally felt like mine. My phone buzzed. I barely glanced at the notification before I swiped it open, expecting something random from my sister, Danielle. Maybe a meme. Maybe one of those fake-friendly check-ins she had been doing more often lately. But the moment my eyes landed on the text, my stomach dropped. It was a screenshot of a group chat. And right at the top, her message read, "She's so dumb. She still thinks we care about her. Just wait until we get what we want." My heart slammed against my ribs. I scanned the chat, laughing emojis, agreement from people I thought were my friends. This wasn't just a mistake. This was proof. My sister had been playing me. For months, she'd been acting nice, checking in, inviting me to hangouts. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had changed. But I was just a game to her. And now I needed to find out what they wanted, before I burned it all down. I swallowed down the lump of betrayal in my throat and forced my fingers to move. Me. Haha, what's this? I wanted to see how she would react. Within seconds, the typing bubble appeared. Danielle. OMG. Ignore that. It wasn't about you. Just a joke. Sent it by accident.
Right.
Because laughing about tricking me was just so funny. I let my thumbs hover over my keyboard for a second, before responding. Me. Oh, LOL. No worries. Anyway, what were you saying about this weekend? I'd love to hang out. Smiling face with smiling eyes. She took the bait. Danielle. YSSS girl. Can't wait.
She thought I was still blind.
Good. That made this so much easier. That weekend, I met up with them at a trendy cafe, playing my part. Danielle hugged me when she saw me, like we were the closest sisters in the world. I hugged her back, letting her believe she was winning. Her friends greeted me like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't trashed me behind my back. We chatted for a while, small talk, fake laughter, until... "So, I heard you got a raise at work," Danielle said, eyes gleaming. "That's huge for you."
Oh.
So that's what they wanted. Money. I gave them a sheepish smile. "Oh, yeah, just a small bump in salary. Nothing major." I saw disappointment flicker in her eyes before she masked it with fake excitement. But I wasn't done yet. Honestly, I sighed dramatically. I was actually thinking of investing in a business soon. Maybe even getting a place of my own. I watched them perk up, like vultures circling a fresh kill. Over the next few weeks, I let them think they were tightening their grip. Danielle started acting like the best sister ever. She invited me out more, called me every day, asked about my job, my plans, my finances. You should totally invest in my friend's business, she said one night, grinning.
Right.
Because handing over my money to some scammer she knew was totally a great idea. I pretended to consider it, nodding thoughtfully. But behind the scenes, I was locking everything down. I changed my banking passwords. I removed Danielle from my emergency contacts. I even talked to a lawyer about setting up extra security on my finances. Because when I cut them off, they weren't going to get a single penny. One night, Danielle invited me to a party at her friend's house. I wasn't planning to go. But then, as she was grabbing drinks, I saw her phone light up on the table. I normally wouldn't snoop.
But this?
This wasn't normal. I glanced down. Message preview. She's coming to the party, right? Make sure she drinks a lot. It'll be easier that way. A chill ran down my spine.
What the hell?
I was done pretending, but I needed one last act before I exposed them. At the party, I let Danielle hand me a drink. I even pretended to sip it. Then I wandered into another room, and that's when I heard it. She has access to so much money, one of Danielle's friends whispered. We just have to get her to sign something. That was it. That was all I needed. I walked back in, drink still in hand, and sat down next to Danielle. And then, in front of everyone, I said, So, which one of you came up with this little scam? Silence. Then Danielle laughed nervously. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, showed them the screenshot she accidentally sent me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The blood drained from her face. And then, like clockwork, her fake excuses started pouring in. But I was already gone. The moment I walked out of that party, I felt lighter. It was like a weight had been lifted from my chest, the suffocating presence of fake love, manipulation, and years of deception. But I knew walking away wasn't enough. I needed to make sure they could never touch me again. The first thing I did, I blocked every single one of them.
Danielle.
Her fake friends. The people who had laughed at me behind my back while pretending to be my friends.
Gone.
Then, I went through my emails, social media, and accounts. I changed passwords, updated security questions, removed every trace of my sister from anything she had access to. My finances?
Locked down.
My phone? Changed my number. I wasn't just cutting her off. I was erasing her access to my life entirely. By the time I was done, there was no way she could ever contact me again. And that's when the calls started coming in from our mother. I stared at my phone, watching my mom's name flash across the screen. I knew exactly what this was. Danielle had gone running to her, playing the victim, spinning a story where I was the cruel, ungrateful sister who had abandoned her family. I sighed and picked up. Before I could even say a word, my mom's sharp voice cut through the line. What did you do to Danielle? I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice calm. Mom, did she tell you what she tried to do? She said you embarrassed her in front of her friends, humiliated her for no reason, and now she's crying her eyes out. Do you know how heartless that makes you look? My grip tightened around my phone. Of course, Danielle didn't tell the full story. Mom, I said slowly, I have proof. She was using me, manipulating me. She only wanted my money, and when I didn't fall for it, she tried to trap me into signing something drunk. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Silence. For the first time, Mom hesitated. But then, as always, she fell back on her excuses. She's your sister, honey. Family forgives. Maybe she just... No, my voice was firm, unshaken. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's not a mistake. She knew exactly what she was doing. Another pause. Then, softer, more manipulative. You know she's struggling right now. Can't you just help her a little? My heart went cold. That was it. That was the reason my mother was really calling. She didn't care about what Danielle had done. She only cared that I was financially stable and that my sister could still use me as a safety net. Goodbye, Mom.
Click.
For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And I refused to feel guilty for it. The next day, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my lawyer. Hey, I need to make sure my finances and assets are protected from any potential fraud attempts. She asked me a few questions, and when I explained the situation, she didn't even hesitate. You need to set up legal barriers, she said. Freeze any shared accounts, flag suspicious activity, and secure your personal assets. If she's desperate, she could try to forge signatures or manipulate people to access your money. I felt a chill go down my spine. I never thought my own sister would stoop that low. But she had already proven what she was capable of. So I didn't wait. By the end of the day, I had closed old joint accounts, set up fraud alerts on my bank accounts, informed my employer that no one, not even family, was authorized to handle my documents, filed a legal notice restricting any financial requests related to my name. It was exhausting. But when I finally lay in bed that night, I knew one thing for certain. Danielle could never touch me again. 3 days passed. Then, out of nowhere, an email popped up in my inbox. From Danielle. Subject: I'm sorry, please call me. I just stared at it. I knew what this was. The classic manipulator playbook. Phase 1. Try to gaslight me into thinking it was all a misunderstanding. Phase 2. If that doesn't work, play the victim and beg for sympathy. Phase 3. If all else fails, turn to rage and blame me. I clicked it open, scanning her words. I don't know what happened between us. I feel like you misunderstood everything, and I wish we could just go back to being the close sisters we were. Please, can we meet up and talk? I just want my sister back. I love you. My fingers hovered over the reply button. But then I thought back to that night. The laughing in the group chat. The way she tried to set me up. The way she saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. And I closed the email. Unread. Danielle had lost the right to be in my life. The strangest part about cutting my sister out? I expected to feel alone. But instead, I started noticing something else. The people who actually cared about me, truly, deeply cared, were still here. A close friend from work noticed I seemed off. She invited me over, just to talk. We shared a bottle of wine, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed, a real, deep laugh. Another friend sent me a message. Hey, I saw you cut ties with Danielle. I just wanted to say, I get it. If you ever need to talk, I'm here.
And it hit me.
I spent so much time trying to earn my sister's love, trying to prove I was good enough for her. And yet, the whole time, I already had people who loved me for who I was. I just needed to choose them instead. The last message I ever got from Danielle came 2 weeks later. It was short, bitter. You think you're better than me? I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, without hesitation, I deleted it. She no longer had power over me. She never would again. The day after I deleted Danielle's final message, I woke up feeling different. Lighter.
Clearer.
For years, I had carried the weight of her expectations, her manipulations, her conditional love, and now it was finally gone. I made my coffee and sat on my balcony, watching the city come to life. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for my happiness. But cutting her off wasn't just about deleting a number.
It was about rebuilding my life in a way that was truly mine.
That meant setting new boundaries. That meant choosing kindness, but only for those who truly deserved it. And that meant never, ever letting someone like Danielle into my life again. It wasn't easy. A week later, I got a call from my mother again. This time, she wasn't yelling. She was crying. Danielle's struggling, she whispered. She's in a really bad place. I know she hurt you, but she's still your sister. She needs you. I gripped my phone, taking a deep breath. The old me, the one desperate for validation, for approval, might have caved. But not anymore. I kept my voice calm, firm. She needed me when she was laughing about using me. She needed me when she was trying to trap me. I gave her chances, Mom. She burned every single one. Silence.
Then,
I just don't understand why you're being so cold. That stung. Because the truth was, I wasn't being cold. I was just finally protecting myself. But to people who benefit from your lack of boundaries, self-respect always looks like cruelty. I'm not cold, I said softly. I'm just done. And for the first time, I really meant it. One afternoon, I walked into my favorite cafe, ready to write in my journal, something that had become my new routine. As I ordered my coffee, I overheard a woman in front of me struggling to pay. Her card wasn't working. She fumbled in her bag, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Without thinking, I tapped my card on the machine. "On me," I said with a small smile. She looked at me, stunned. "Wait, seriously?" I nodded. "I've been there before. It's okay." Her eyes welled up with tears. "You have no idea how much this means to me," she whispered. "I just got out of a really bad situation. Today was supposed to be my fresh start," and she stopped, shaking her head. "You just made my whole day." I blinked, realizing something huge. For years, I had wasted my kindness on people who didn't deserve it. But that didn't mean kindness itself was wrong. It just meant I needed to give it to the right people. People who wouldn't take it for granted. 3 months passed. Life was good. Peaceful. Then one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I debated ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to answer. The moment I picked up, I regretted it. It was Danielle. She was sobbing. "Please, I need help." I stayed silent. I have nothing left," she choked out. "Mom won't give me money. My friends turned their backs on me. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. This was exactly what she had done to me for years. Played the victim. Pulled at my emotions. Expected me to drop everything and save her. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said quietly. "But I can't help you." She inhaled sharply. "What? You're just going to let me suffer?" "You let me suffer." That shut her up. I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. That night, I met up with the people who had become my real family. Friends who had stood by me. People who had never once used me, manipulated me, or made me feel like I had to earn their love. As we laughed over dinner, I realized something. Family isn't about who you share blood with. It's about the people who show up for you, not just when they need something, but when you need them, too. Danielle and I had been born into the same family. But that didn't mean I had to keep her in my life. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go of the people who only bring you pain. And that's exactly what I did. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't waiting for the next time Danielle would use me. I wasn't worried about being tricked, manipulated, or laughed at behind my back. I was free. And freedom tasted better than any fake relationship ever could. I focused on myself. I started a new hobby. Traveled. Strengthened the friendships that truly mattered. And most of all, I stopped apologizing for choosing myself. Months turned into a year. Danielle faded into a distant memory, just another lesson in my past. I never checked up on her. Never wondered what she was doing. Because for the first time, my happiness wasn't tied to her anymore. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset, a thought crossed my mind. If I could go back, would I do anything differently? And the answer was simple. No. Because sometimes the people you think are meant to love you the most are actually the ones you need to walk away from. And when you finally do, that's when you find real happiness.